Today I want to tell you about a game that I hold very close to my heart. A game that I have replayed multiple times, with friends as well as in single player. A game that I think never managed to reach its full potential. A game that probably never will. Raft. Raft, much like the title suggests, consists of you floating on a raft and collecting trash in order to expand your raft further. The story of this game goes a lot deeper than that though. From climate change to evil corporations, this game features everything a good story needs. Raft is beloved by many. Given its relatively small price tag, a simple and fun gameplay loop and concept that allows for both single player and multiplayer makes it a perfect game for everyone that enjoys video games. However, Raft is also a game of many problems. Problems most might not notice if you don't play the game as much as I did. Most people that I asked had about 20 to 40 hours in the game. I have about 700. The game has been with me through some of my best and worst times. In these times, I think I found all the reasons this game is great and all the reasons it is flawed. This video will include spoilers. I'll warn you that this video is as much of a review as it is a story retelling. So buckle in, for this is the story of Raft. We'll first start with the history of Raft. Then we'll dive into the game's story by going through it update by update as they release. Then we'll get into the problems of Raft. And then I'll give you all my suggestions I've come up with to fix these problems, including one that I think would single-handedly create infinite content for Raft pretty easily. Raft first started off as an itch.io game in 2016, where it can actually still be downloaded for free. Don't let your inner pirate celebrate just yet though, as this is a very early alpha version of Raft. It's very much unrecognizable when compared to the current version. It's a game built on the Unity engine, and in this early alpha state is fully playable. You start off on a very small raft, collect trash that floats on the ocean. Lurking in the waters is a shark, who will also periodically attack your raft and destroy it if not fended off. The game is a survival game through and through. By collecting trash you can craft tools, small gardens in which you can grow fruit or trees, the seeds of which you find in barrels that float across the ocean. These barrels are the goodie bags of the sea. You can also expand your raft, which in this alpha is basically already the end goal. There is nothing to achieve but your own satisfaction in your raft. I actually played this alpha for myself back in 2016 and I played it a lot. I really enjoyed this very simple gameplay loop. YouTube was loving it as well, with a ton of gaming channels covering this game and exploring its limits. If you lack the funds to buy the actual game, I'd honestly say give this one a shot. It's incredibly fun even in this state. Come May 2018, the game gets an early access Steam release. The game has found a bit more of a cartoony style, a great looking one at that though. Now a bit of a preface. Raft's story was expanded upon update by update. It was a lot different and especially a lot shorter in the first version of Raft. I'll be going through Raft in its current version, and I'll let you know when it originally ended and the main differences the story had and also the shortcomings it had before certain updates. But let's dive into the gameplay of Raft. When you create a world, you can choose one of 5 difficulties. One is creative, which is probably self-explanatory. Then there are the difficulties: peaceful, easy, normal and hard. Peaceful makes no enemies in the game attack. All difficulties above change the speed at which your hunger and thirst bar decrease and how many items you lose when you die. You also can't respawn on your own in hard mode. There's also a possibility of multiple sharks spawning with a maximum limit of 5 on hard. If it's your first playthrough, you should play on either easy or normal. To speak on the gameplay a bit, once you create a world, you start on a 2x2 raft. You will immediately need to focus on getting a food and water source set up. Once your hunger and thirst bar are below this threshold, your maximum running speed will be decreased heavily. Once either of them reaches 0, your health will start depleting. If you want to know the optimal strategy, getting a fishing rod as soon as possible is pretty OP early game. Once you have a fishing rod, a cup and a water purifier, you are good to go. You will eventually see islands in the distance. By crafting a paddle and a one-time use throwable anchor, you can stop at one and collect fruits, chop away at trees using an axe or extract underwater resources like kelp, sand, clay, iron and copper. Keep in mind though, the shark is quite the threat when you're underwater. You are able to distract the shark by crafting a shark bait. These will keep the shark distracted for 1 minute and 20 seconds in most difficulties. One of the most important things to craft is the research table. You can input resources here to unlock new recipes. By doing this, you can craft a little more advanced tools like a better anchor, a sail, a grill or an advanced water purifier. These are the early to mid-game items. You will also relatively quickly find these crates, which are different from the barrels. The difference being that besides having about the same loot as barrels, crates also contain decoration packages. Each of these will unlock one of 66 random decorations. Once you have all of them, which will take quite a while, they will function as normal barrels. You can, by the way, also find the decoration packages in other types of containers. The gameplay loop for the early and basically the entire game is you looting islands and vacated rafts, collecting loot on the ocean either using your hook or nets, and expanding your raft. This might sound monotonous, but trust me, there are few experiences more fun than early game Raft. You will also find 2 blueprints and barrels floating around, one for an antenna and one for a receiver. These are also used on the research table. Okay, so now that I've skipped about 5 hours of gameplay, let's get into the story a bit. On you have a journal, which once you open it reads, Your raft is your home. Your hook is your friend. If your raft breaks, you patch it up. If your hook is lost, you make another. If you fight the big blue stretching out forever, that means you aren't paying attention. There is nothing you can't make if you have the right salvage. Follow any radio frequencies. If it's still broadcasting, it's above water. Others have come before you, more will come after you. Be sure to mark the way. The world is gone, but its stories remain. Gather as many as you can. And for Pete's sake, watch out for sharks. This journal used to not exist up until 1.5 years after the game's release, by the way. When the game first released, the only thing that guided you was your curiosity. I kinda missed this feeling a little bit when playing Raft now. When this game first released and I played it with a friend of mine, we were scared shitless of the big waves and the unknown that is the vast oceans of this game. Now you are basically held by your hand, told what to expect, and immediately get posed the question of why this world is fully flooded in the first place. Which was fun to realize on your own before. Nothing like a late night Discord call with one of your friends and one of you asking, "Oh shit, have you ever thought about why there's so much water here?" I'm making it a bigger issue than it really is though. It's just a minor critique. Back to the aforementioned antenna and receiver. After successfully constructing this construct, you will find you have built a radar and you'll see a blue dot on it. Once you manage to get there, you will find a radio tower. An island different from any other we've seen thus far. If you have wondered how this game tells a story, it's done by the player finding notes and them being added to your journal. They are also read by the person that wrote them. I think this is mostly a good system, though it's basically just a glorified audiobook, since a lot of these notes include a lot of text. By the way, quick shout out to Alidove, by far the best Raft content creator out there. Their videos on Raft story helped me immensely here. On this radio tower you will learn the story of 3 people. They were engineers who were given secret nicknames by their secret employers. They refer to each other with the names Cuckoo, Sparrow and Owl. Sparrow abandoned the other 2 and took a boat to move to a facility called Selene. The original plan was for all 3 of them to go there to build a prototype reactor, which would have been the only renewable energy in this flooded world. Owl thinks that Sparrow betrayed the 2, while Cuckoo is more hopeful and thinks Sparrow is communicating through some of the radio signals that are coming through. These radio signals include distress call from Balboa Island, gunshots on Tangaroa City, communications from Sparrow, who has made it to Selene, and a collection of rafters looking for Utopia. We see a picture of said Utopia and find a person here. Talking with her, we find out that she's a mechanic of sorts called Tala, and that we should hit her up if we need any repairs done. She exclaims,
"Awesome! Let's head out!"
to which she disappears. She's now a playable character we can choose alongside the original 2 player models. There are also no special traits. Yeah, I'll talk more on this later on. Also, this used to be the game's ending. There also used to be no notes here and no Tala. The final room used to look like this. It revealed a bit of the plot as to why the planet is flooded, mainly being that all the ice melted and that the water rose several hundred meters worldwide. There was also a bit of a clearer image of said Utopia with a grid with an X on it. This ending used to be pretty lackluster, not gonna lie. As soon as you reach this point, there was absolutely no reason to continue, except for maybe a couple achievements and perhaps finishing your raft. However, if you are like most, you weren't trying to build a particularly good looking raft, but instead just a functional one, which means there's truly no reason to continue. The achievements are pretty repetitive, like killing the shark 50 times or hooking 5,000 items, but you'll be glad to know, the gameplay has been extended greatly ever since. The first big update was the Large Island update. This update allowed you to get more use out of your receiver. You are now able to locate large islands using it. Large islands are large islands. Really large ones. I'll never forget the moment I first arrived at one. You can find unique loot here like berries, mushrooms and silver algae. And we get to fight against 2 new enemies, poison puffers and the screecher. This update also added a cooking system in a rare island that spawns about 2% of the time on normal island spawns. Sadly, this update still didn't give players that much of a reason to continue. The loot on these islands, while pretty good, is often not worth exploring these gigantic islands for. Obviously going to explore a total of 5 different types of large islands was fun, but it was basically only content for another 1 to 2 hours, which is obviously great for a free update, but not great enough to make this game a classic. By the way, some of you that have a lot of experience with the game might be scrolling down to comment that there were only 4 large islands at first, but you'll be surprised to learn that what I said is not a lie and used to be true. 2 updates later, the large islands were made a little more important by adding 3 tameable animals. These included the llama, which gave you wool for body armor, the goat and the clucker, which gave you milk and eggs respectively. These could be used in cooking or consumed directly. Don't you just love chewing away at a raw egg alongside its shell? In case you don't, cooking is a great alternative. While most recipes require pretty rare resources, there are some that are easier to make. You will need to find the recipes to make them, which can be found in almost every type of chest and also in barrels and crates. Cooked meals will extend your hunger meter even further, making it take even longer for it to drain. You could also use eggs to craft the brand new healing salve, which does exactly what you'd expect it to do. This update was great. You even had to feed the animals using water fountains and grass plots, which used the brand new dirt resource only found on large islands. They also added a new enemy, the Warthog. It kinda functions like the Charger in Left 4 Dead 2. Just that you don't need another player to come save you. These drop leather that is also used for armor. They also put up quite the fight. If you ever go on a large island, be sure to craft a metal spear, which was at this point the best weapon there is, and is still most likely the best weapon you'll have unlocked at the point you first visit a large island. The bow is also a great weapon and needed to kill the screechers, which are annoying as hell by the way. Usually they will circle around like half the large island. When you enter this area, they will periodically go to collect stones and then drop them on you, doing immense damage. Killing them is also a huge pain, as they will only collect their stone in areas deliberately placed far away from you. So unless you manage to get to them quick enough to get off a hit with a spear, you are forced to fight them using only your bow, the arrows of which are quite expensive to craft. You could settle for stone arrows, but these do a lot less damage. Metal arrows require 1 metal as well as feathers, which are both quite the hard resources to get. Feathers can be gathered by using birds' nests or killing seagulls, which I somehow have managed to not mention yet, but oh god. Seagulls are the rafter's worst nightmare. Forget about the shark chewing on your raft. Seagulls pick away at all crops you plant. You could place a scarecrow, but they'll just destroy that one as well. There are always a total of 2 seagulls. If you do kill them, they respawn after a couple minutes. Even building a roof over your crops won't stop them. These are a huge pain. They can do you some good though by landing in a bird's nest and providing feathers. In case you're wondering, the best strategy to kill screechers is to wait on top of mountains until they come flying at you. You can also just ignore them, but if you want to get all achievements, you'll have to figure out how to kill them to get the 50 kills achievement. I spent weeks getting this. Back to the animals though. They also have 2 rare variations each, one rare and one even rarer variant. These were a fun addition. Animals used to be able to die if not fed, by the way. This was changed so that they would simply just not drop loot. I still have a name tag from one of my animals that died about 3 years ago at this point. Rest in peace, Armin. Back to the large islands though. After you got a small coop set up to take care of your animals, which takes a ton of batteries by the way, which can't be recharged at this point, the game was done once again. Then came update 10, which released about 1.5 years after the game's initial release. This update was called the first chapter. This was the biggest update to Raft. The receiver now has a frequency system that allows you to reach different story islands, which it used to not have. This is also the update that added the journal. The radio tower, which got a new look by the way, is now no longer the finale. We can venture on to new story islands. Story islands are the main attraction of Raft in my opinion. They are what you will look forward to the most while playing. Going forward, I'll be giving each of the 8 story islands a rating based on location, gameplay and loot, starting off with the radio tower. The gameplay is very meh. The location is a pretty cool idea and it looks great. It has some underwater elements and a bit of climbing. It gets a lot of bonus points for simply being the first story island and it being such a classic. For location I gotta give it a 5 out of 5. Great look and classic location. For the gameplay I gotta give it a harsh 2 out of 5. The loot here will actually help you out quite a bunch at this part of the game, though it is not incredible. The loot gets a 3 out of 5. Keep in mind I rate the loot in terms of how far most players are at this point in time. Once we get to the end game, the loot will probably be a 1 out of 5 at most. Overall, this island scores 10 out of 15 points. The first new story island we visit is Vazagatan, to which we find the code of in the radio tower. It's a crashed yacht. This is an incredibly fun new story location. It also tells a bit of a story through its notes. The yacht is owned by a politician called Olaf. Keep that name in mind throughout this video. Despite spreading the message that people have to work together, Olaf simply took this yacht and fled together with friends and goodies in order to escape the rising waters. Or rather live on them, leaving the general population to simply be flooded. Olaf failed to bring enough supplies though, instead going for fun things like alcohol and dance floors. This problem was made worse when lurkers arrived, which are mutated rats. These went on to eat half of the ship's supplies. We also find out about the story of Hanne, who regrets going on this yacht alongside Olaf. She misses her significant other, Ruben, who left for one of the floating cities that Olaf was supposed to help create. Olaf goes on to tame the lurkers and created an army of even stronger and even more mutated rats using food and pain as training and conditioning. Olaf then wondered if he could do this with other animals, which he hoped to do with a big animal population that he heard about from a place called Caravan Town. The ship eventually crashed and Olaf and his lurker army escaped using the one and only lifeboat. Looking at the gameplay, this story island features quite a lot more than what we got on Radio Tower. While the Radio Tower consisted merely of a bit of a simple parkour, Vazagatan featured vast and also dark corridors. To navigate these, you can use a brand new headlight recipe which can be found on the Radio Tower ever since the Chapter 1 update, or you could just turn up your monitor brightness. Probably the biggest problem you're faced with on this island, besides the lurkers, is food and water. You see, the top speed you run at in Raft isn't really that high when compared to these gigantic islands, or in this case, gigantic ship. As I've mentioned, once your food goes down, your character moves incredibly slowly. If you find yourself in the middle of Vazagatan without any food or water left, you are in for a very bad time, as running back to your raft could potentially take multiple minutes. I have died many times due to starving on large islands or story locations. Thankfully, Vazagatan features a lot of food in its loot table, including watermelons, which mainly replenish your thirst meter. Pro tip by the way, Raft's hunger system relies on a craving system. I'm not here to go into the complete maths, but generally it means that the lower your bar is, the more it will fill up when you eat something. Which is why it's generally advised to eat food only when your bar is already really low, especially in dire situations. Hazagatan features a pretty good loot table and pretty fun gameplay. You have to find creative ways to open doors to get up the ship floor by floor. You'll also find 2 new blueprints on this island that are crucial for you to get to the next story location: the engine and the steering wheel. To give my rating on this island, the first new story location being a huge crashed yacht is awesome. Looks wise it's great and features some underwater loot as well. For location it gets a 5 out of 5. Gameplay wise it's pretty fun, but it's also a little repetitive and the lurkers respawn as soon as you look away. So for that it will only be a 3 out of 5. The loot here is nothing remarkable, but also nothing to flock at, as you can also find the brand new biofuel here. So I give it a 3.5 out of 5. The total score for Hazagatan is 11.5 out of 15. Once you enter the code to the next story location, Balboa Island, you will notice how it goes against the way your ship is floating. This is very much by design. You see, in Raft, the wind direction never changes. You are always traveling north, so now you will have to go against the wind direction, which has thus far been your only momentum by using engines. One engine is suffice for 100 foundation pieces, so you might need multiple. It caps out at 6 though. Also, in case you were wondering, more sails or more engines don't mean more speed. Kinda. You are able to build 1 extra engine which will increase your speed slightly, but it's almost negligible unless you are on the endgame and don't have anything else to spend biofuel or wood on. Biofuel can at this point not be crafted. Wood however can also be used as a resource. Balboa Island is definitely not an island you will miss, since it is by far the biggest island in the entirety of Raft. For now. Be sure to bring a lot of food and water to this island, since there isn't a whole lot of food on the loot table of this island. On this island you will find 2 new types of trees that only drop wood and the seeds of themselves, which is pretty useful. It is to note however that these seeds drop pretty rarely, so they aren't renewable. You will also find 2 new enemies on this island. One of them are bears. They do pretty high damage and jump at you. These are pretty dangerous actually, but you can outrun them mostly. They aren't that great at navigating anything that isn't just flat ground, so that can be used to trick them for the most part. The other enemy is Mama Bear. Mama Bear is not a force to be reckoned with. You will need to distract her using berries you collect around the island in order to get access to her cave. In this cave you will find the new strongest weapon, the machete. It's a cut-off piece of road sign that says Österränge, which is a reference to the Swedish city of the same name, in which the Red Beat Interactive headquarters are located, who are the developers of this game. Alongside it you will also find its blueprint. The story of this island is pretty contained within itself, but also pretty dramatic. This island used to be the top of a mountain, now only its peak peeking out of the water. Sets of engineers used to rotate on this island every 3 months and maintain the radio towers. Bruno and Astrid, who are siblings, were in charge when the world flooded. Both of them were stuck. At one point Astrid disappeared without a trace, leaving Bruno by himself. He went crazy due to the loneliness. His downward spiral can be experienced by reading the notes found on this island. He went on to create children for himself, which are incredibly creepy to come across in the forests of Balboa. Bruno created personalities and stories for his children. Eventually, Bruno decided to go look for his sister Astrid. He decided to take his children along. However, only 2 of them fit on the boat. He created a scenario in which one of his children murdered another, so that he was forced to take others. Bruno decided to take Henry and Miranda with him. He left Bobby to fend off the bears and the triplets to take care of the relay station. Besides the machete, we also find recipes for a fuel tank, a biofuel refiner and fuel pipes. We also find bees here, from which we can collect honeycombs. These are crucial in creating your own biofuel. Biofuel is created by putting food items or animal heads inside the biofuel refiner and adding honey. After a short while, you'll have biofuel ready at your hands. You are also able to farm honey on newly added large islands, evergreen islands. These are a lot smaller than the tropical large islands, and are the first new biome ever added to Raft. You can find these large islands by entering the code of Balboa and another location that we'll get to later on, and then going to a green dot near to the story island. Let's get to rating Balboa Island though. I must say the location is a little less creative than others. Though the story itself is great, it's a gigantic island and it's easy to get lost here. If you are to play in multiplayer, you will for sure lose your friends in the woods. The environment is however pretty detailed, but also makes some questionable design choices in certain areas. Also you find another NPC here. Johnny is his name. He asks us if we need some muscle on board and then excitingly agrees to leave the heavy lifting to him, after which he disappears once again as now a playable character. I must note that these playable characters you find on each second story island were only added in the final update. Thus, this guy makes absolutely no sense here story-wise. I'll get into them a bit more later. For now, let's get into Balboa's rating. For location, I'm giving this one a harsh 3 out of 5. The gameplay on this island had its high points, like having to distract Mama Bear using berries that you can only find here, and using the newly found machete to clear a cave. There was also this toxic pit here, which a lot of people dislike, but I personally don't have a problem with. In general, the gameplay is fine, but not the best, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5. To speak on the loot here, while the chests are few and far in between, and they mostly consist of food. Honey is also pretty important, and the new trees are great. For loot, this one receives a 4 out of 5. There are 2 reasons as to why it's so high, which I'll only get to later. So the final rating for this island is 11 out of 15. This was the end of Chapter 1. Once you explored Balboa Island, there was once again no reason to continue outside of wanting to see the evergreen large islands. I must say though, this wasn't as bad, since you knew that at some point a new chapter would be releasing. The chapter system is great. Only about 3 months after Chapter 1 we got the beehive update, which added beehives which can be used to create honeycombs on your raft. This was a great addition. No longer were you required to visit islands for biofuel. This update also added good healing salve, which was healing salve but better. The game was at this point a giant success. Everyone and their mother played it and uploaded videos of it or streamed it. Do you watch any gaming YouTubers? Look up the name followed by Raft and you will find them making a let's play of it 99% of the time. So it only made sense that it only took 8 more months for the next story update to release, Chapter 2. Heading off to the next destination called Caravan Town, we find exactly that, a town full of caravans on a desert island. This island has a ton of rooms to explore and also features closets you can individually open and find loot in, which is pretty cool. The gameplay on this island is awesome. On this island you will find ziplines, for which you'll have to find the brand new zipline tool and its crafting recipe to use them. You also find a battery charger here, which is a feature everyone has been asking for a long time. You run through batteries when using them for your animal coop, so being able to recharge them was a nice addition. You will also find engine controls here, which allows you to control all your engines at once. Fireworks have also been added. These have next to no uses and are basically just a fun addition. These can be used to take down seagulls though. The final new tool you find on this island is the metal detector, and oh boy is it great, but I'll get back to it in a bit. The gameplay on this island consists of finding zipline parts, which you will have to find in numerous fun ways, including diving down real deep into the ocean, which can be done by using air pockets that you find along the way. On the way down you will face off against a ton of poison puffers. Alongside all of this we also fight against a Screecher, who has a fun new retexture. Also, I'm to this day not sure if this is true or not, but it is said that the animals that spawn on this island, which, yes by the way they do spawn here, have a higher chance of being a rare variant. I didn't find any real proof of this, but I do remember being successful in finding rare animal variations on this island, so make of that information what you will. Besides the Screecher and domesticatable animals, there are also mudhogs. These are basically just warthogs retextured to have a little less HP. They are fine. They are easily beaten using the bow though. The story of Caravan Town is that of a lot of people living here. There was a kid named Detto that wanted to save humanity by experimenting. His experiments included a water pump to drain the ocean, a bike-powered diving suit, and a rocket to explore other planets. Olaf arrived, the politician from Vazagatan who fled together with his Red Army, leaving everyone else behind in case you remember. Once he arrived, the butchers of this island fell ill, and so did a lot of people, including Detto's mother. The doctor diagnosed salmonella. The doctor suspects Olaf's arrival to have something to do with it. So do Detto and his brother Sanjay. The brothers sneaked onto Olaf's boat to see if there's any medicine for their mother, in which they only found the army of mutated rats, an overly large hyena, and notes of Olaf's plan to train his own personal animal army. Olaf then deceives the people of Caravan Town. He gives a speech that he himself only left the Floating Cities project because he didn't want to share the benefits with the working class. Olaf convinces everyone to take up arms and demands sanctuary at the floating city of Tangaroa, which is coincidentally the next story island we will visit. To give Caravan Town its rating, location-wise, 5 out of 5. Incredibly creative, good looking and awesome underwater section. The gameplay also gets a 5 out of 5. And as close to perfection as this island is, the loot will have to be a 4 out of 5. There is a ton of loot, but a lot of it is frankly shit. Tons of low quality food or just a piece of wood. There is a lot of nice loot in the mix, as well as some metal detector treasures, which is why it receives a 4 out of 5 still. So this island now gets 14 out of 15 points for me, the highest rating as of yet. Will any future islands be able to compete? Also, to quickly get back to the metal detector, this thing is great. Once you have it, each small island will have a treasure you can find using it, and each large island will have between 2 and 3. This is also the reason Balboa Island got such a high rating. Balboa Island is the only island to be able to have up to a total of 6 treasures, which is double that of any other island. Vazagatan is able to have 1 and Caravan Town can have 3. No further story location can have any metal detector treasures. The metal detector, aside from giving you some general loot, can give you some of Raft's rarest items. You can dig up music cassettes, which there are a total of 4 ones that you can find with the metal detector. There are 2 other ones, which we'll get to later. You can also find tiki heads that can be stacked once you have all 4 of them to give you a secret item, which I'm not here to spoil. Do note that the game is glitched. This is not documented and not proven. It simply has to be though, since I think every person that has ever tried getting all 4 heads can attest. Once you have 3 different ones, you will not find the 4th one. In my first playthrough of this game, trying to get all 4 for the achievement, I spent weeks trying to get it. I must have had about 20 of each other head before I found the one that I was missing. The game is said to have a 1 in 4 chance of spawning each, but I'm not buying that in the slightest. There are also a total of 8 different developer paintings. You can find the toy robot, which is just a nice decoration. Then there is the golden toy robot. The golden toy robot is the rarest item in Raft. This is not the exact math, but once you find a spot using the metal detector, you have about a 1 in 1000 chance of getting it. It is often claimed to be even rarer, but that's approximately the true number. I'm sure someone in the comments will be willing to do the extra math to show the exact number. Now at this point the gameplay is pretty good. We have a lot of island variations. After visiting Caravan Town, there will even be desert biome islands. These are smaller but are a fun variation. The metal detector has retroactively added more gameplay to each island, which is great. You can fully automate almost every resource now, and only have to go diving every so often for metal, copper and seaweed. At this point the game has solidified itself as a must-play. The next story location is Tangaroa, which is a huge floating city under a giant glass dome. This location looks incredible. Be sure to bring a ton of food and water on this island as well. To quickly get the story out of the way, since I'm sure you're wondering how such a structure exists in this world, this city was built way before the flood on a theoretical basis, meaning it would never survive when left on its own. Ruben is the lead engineer on this island. He's also the husband of Hannah from Wasagatan, if you may remember. Ruben is concerned that Captain James Tully is pushing the engines of this island to their limit, to outrun the incoming rafters, the ones from Caravan Town. The captain decides to use lethal forces and shoot at the rafters after the engines fail. This is the same shooting that was initially reported on in the radio tower. The rafters eventually manage to get onto the island, releasing lurkers and strapping tasers to the butler bots. Ruben finds Deto in a smaller raft. They both repair a small vessel and leave to go and find Utopia, while stopping at Baruna Point along the way. Baruna Point will be the next story location, which we get to in a bit. Tangaroa is visually beautiful and also really fun to explore. The elevators in the skyscraper still work, and you will be able to search through many rooms of this island, which is incredibly fun. There is also an underground section, which will actually be where you start before you are able to open the top entrances. The underground section is pretty hard and also kinda mazy, especially when revisiting to go farm a very unique resource that is exclusively found here, strawberries. Also bananas, but its trees drop enough seeds to be fully renewable. Strawberries have a very rare chance of dropping their seed when found, so you will have to revisit here every so often if you plan on having any strawberries on your farm. You will also find a brand new resource here for the first time, titanium. Titanium is a direct upgrade to metal. As of the update of Chapter 2, it has very few uses, those being new crafting recipes that you find here, the large storage and the electric purifier. I'm sorry to report that the large storage, unless used for decorative purposes, is almost useless. By stacking 4 normal chests, you get double the amount of storage, for the same amount of space. Also, this is the optimal storage setup right here, using these tables. On my personal raft I have quite a bunch of chests set up this way. By the way, this is my personal raft as of right now. I am planning a nicer rebuild, don't worry. We also find a water tank and water pipe recipe. These can be used to store water and make it flow directly into the sprinklers, which is incredibly useful. There are also a total of 2 secret rooms to be found here. One at this crane container puzzle, where you can move into a side room and find a bunch of titanium and a machete, and one at this elevator, where pressing the secret button will grant you a bunch of loot, including a new music cassette that is exclusively found here. It also exclusively plays the elevator music. Another pro tip, revisiting story locations will cause all the loot to respawn, except for a few very rare exceptions. But these 2 secret rooms alongside the strawberries do respawn, so you can just loot this place over and over again, which is especially great for all the titanium. You can also find titanium by using the metal detector, by the way, but it's one of the more rare loots. I'd say like 1 in 5 times you'll find some. Once you get to the final room of this island, which involves you launching the bridge off the top of the dome, you will find another character here, Elaine. She tells you that if you get her a ride out of here, she can offer you entrepreneurial consulting. She then becomes a new playable character as well. Her skills seem to be trading, which is a thing in this game that was only added in the final update alongside these characters, so we will get to that later. To give Tangaroa its rating, location-wise this has to be getting a 5 out of 5. Something about seeing it for the first time is incredible, and also kind of ominous. There is something about seeing it through the fog for the first time that makes it seem like it is approaching you rather than you approaching it. Gameplay-wise, it also gets a 4.5 out of 5. You feel like you're in Mirror's Edge on this one, and exploring through the apartments is incredibly fun. The only downside is the underground, which did feel a little tiresome at times and is a bit mazy, but I cannot deduct more than half a point for that. The loot here is a total 5 out of 5 as well, so this island receives 14.5 out of 15. Before we get to the next island, I'm gonna have to quickly speak on the state of the game once you beat Chapter 2. At this point you are basically self-sufficient from all the loot you find, and thus will no longer need to explore any other islands. The game quickly turns into a rush for the ending, which I get by the way. You are looking for that further dopamine rush by just going from island to island. It is fun and it feels great. You are also incredibly eager to find out how it continues obviously, and it feels like it will never end. Which it should feel like by the way, but you will find that it will very quickly come to an end. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and enjoy the ride while we can, shall we? The next update released another 8 months later and was only a minor update. This was the update that added the decoration packages and crates on the ocean. It also added a chance of you spotting animals in the ocean. This includes whales, turtles, dolphins and bird packs, which are seen in the sky, but whatever. These are, by the way, a 10 out of 10 addition. Raft desperately needs something like this, and still does, but I'll get to that later as well. Almost exactly 1 year after the last minor update, Chapter 3 released, which was, surprising to everyone I think, the final chapter. I'm not sure if I was the only one, but I was honestly expecting this game to kinda just update forever. I know in hindsight this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but Minecraft does it as well. So I was kinda thinking that there would be a lot more to come. I definitely wasn't expecting the final chapter to be Chapter 3. Also, to add onto it, this was kinda announced to be the final update in general. I was honestly shocked by this, and about 30 months later, I'm still in disbelief. I'll speak more on that later, but for now, let's get to enjoy the final chapter of Raft. So let's get right into what this update added. The first new mechanic is trading. Each large island now has a trading post on it. In these, you're able to buy things using trash cubes. Trash cubes are made using the recycler, the blueprint of which you find on the radio tower. You make trash cubes by adding in any type of trash or resource that isn't food into the recycler. Generally speaking, the more rare a resource is, the more it will fill up the machine. This means that you need about 30 palm trees for a trash cube, or just about 2 titanium. Pro tip: the wool you get from llamas you find on large islands is worth the same amount as titanium in the recycler, thus making it by far the best resource to recycle for trash cubes. You will also need trading coins for certain purchases. These can be traded for by buying a special bait at the trader using scraps and fishing new special fish. These look cool but have no further use than to be sold to the trader. Them having so many different cool looks is actually a downside, since they fill up your inventory quickly. You can unlock a total of 3 tiers at the trader, which you can do by selling fish to them. By the way, the trader is not there. You simply interact with a cash register. Higher tiers allow you to buy better bait to catch better fish that are worth more trading coins. You're also able to buy higher tier loot from the higher tiers, eventually reaching titanium and the advanced scarecrow, which is the only way to fully stop seagulls in its range, since it cannot be destroyed. A godsend of an item. You can also buy new recipes that actually have effects like faster running speed or being invincible to damage for a short amount of time. In my time playing this game, these never really got a ton of use, I must admit. I found the recipes that allow for longer underwater breathing and faster swimming to be the most useful, especially in the next story location we will be speaking of. But yeah, that's trading. I am not a big fan of the system, and I will speak on it further later. We also get a new machine, the juicer. With it you can make drinks, which is the first time you're able to expand your thirst bar. For now, let's move on to the next story island, Varuna Point. Arriving at Varuna Point, you will see it's the top of 2 skyscrapers, one with a crane on it. This island might not seem like it's a big deal at first. It's just 2 squares. However, once you go underwater, this is by far the best looking underwater location in Raft. The gameplay gets a little messy here. For a game about the ocean, the swimming mechanic isn't that great in this game. You will find a lot of air pockets down here, but I still heavily recommend you to craft an oxygen bottle and flippers. These increase the time you're able to breathe and your swimming speed respectively. Cooking and juicing the recipes to be able to swim faster and hold your breath for longer is also a good call here. Varuna Point only has a very small amount of story. It tells of an abandoned project, abandoned because a former construction worker, who is known as Grabber, turned kleptomatic. He took joy in stealing stuff from the project, which caused it to be left unfinished. Bruno arrived at the island, the crazy guy from Balboa. He built a satellite dish at the top of the crane to try and contact his sister Astrid, seemingly to no avail. After having one of his kids that he built stolen, the one called Miranda, he proceeded to quickly leave the island, shortly after which Detto and Ruben arrived. After having some of their tools stolen, they quickly left as well. Varuna Point, despite its great looks, is one of the lesser fun islands. You will find yourself quickly growing tired of the island. There is a new enemy here, the anglerfish, which is fun I guess. What's annoying though is the fact that there's an achievement for killing 50 of them. These do not respawn until you revisit the island, which means you will have to visit this island somewhere between 8 to 9 times, because only so many spawn here at once. There is one pretty cool thing about this island though that I haven't mentioned yet. You find out about the Grabber's cage, which he stated he can't get to anymore since the flooding started. After moving through a ton of his traps, you do eventually find it. This is where a boss fight starts. You fight off against the Rhino Shark, who is unkillable by any traditional means. You have to trick him into charging at the pillar in the middle of the room, after which you place explosive barrels inside of it. This will open the ceiling, but eventually it will be enough to kill him. This boss fight is pretty fun in my opinion, if maybe pretty comical. I enjoyed it a lot. Looting him you will receive a ton of shark meat and a big statue of the Rhino Shark. We find some new blueprints here as well. The advanced headlight, the advanced battery, which is a godsend by the way, the wind turbine, which is even more of a godsend, and an electric grill. The wind turbine is a must-have for each raft. You no longer require biofuel to charge your batteries. Pro tip: the higher your wind turbines are placed, the quicker they charge your batteries. The electric grill is also nice, and so is the advanced headlight. Though admittedly I have never put one on my head I think. Let's get to the rating. For location this one gets a 3.5 out of 5. The above water area looks a little bland, though the underwater one looks beautiful. The rooms are even more mazy than the underground of Tangaroa, and swimming is just not fleshed out enough to make this location really be as fun as it was intended. I still like it, just that it did make it receive a rather harsh 3.5 out of 5. For gameplay, this one gets a 3.5 out of 5 as well. The boss fight makes up about 2 of those whole points. Swimming and constantly drowning is just not that fun. The trapped areas are nice and the boss fight is great, but otherwise I think most players are glad to quickly move on from this island. Loot-wise, this one gets a 5 out of 5. There is a ton of loot to be found here if you dare to revisit it, and simply for the fact that we get the wind turbine here, this one has to get a 5 out of 5. So the total rating of this one is 12 out of 15. Let's move right into the next story location, which is also subsequently the biggest one yet, Temperance. Temperance is massive. Even when you're still multiple hundreds of meters away, you'll already stumble upon its first ice caps. That's right, this island is set in a polar climate. You will explore igloos, climb around the massive hills of this island while driving with snowmobiles, and fight against polar bears. I will first tell you about what you do here before getting into the story. You will stumble upon this building here, which is Celine, the reactor project that Sparrow was heading out to, the engineer from the radio tower. Once you explore through some igloos and solve a puzzle at an observatory, which is where you will find Bruno's kid Henry by the way, you will eventually enter Celine. You then put on a hazmat suit and fight through the heavily radioactive area here. These will only last a short while, so you constantly have to equip new ones. After fighting against a ton of mutant bugs, you will eventually manage to pump out the radioactive gas and cool the generator. Our door then opens where we find the last unlockable character, Shogo. Shogo says he's a bioengineer and asks if we have space on a raft for him. I can't wait until I get to speak on these characters. So basically, the story here is that Bruno, Detto and Ruben all arrived here. Bruno was seemingly saved by Detto, who patched him up and brought him to Ruben. Bruno interacting with real humans seems to have cured his delusions as we find out Henry, his son Nibelt, no longer speaks to him. We also learn about the story of Sparrow. Sparrow believed that the other engineer on the radio tower, Owl, was a spy of the investors that caused this mess to begin with. This reactor was built to power the Floating Cities project, even if it did fail eventually. We also learn that Utopia is actually a real place, and we find the code to go and find it, which we will be doing shortly. Let's quickly speak on some new recipes found here first though. We get the Advanced Biofuel Refiner, which allows you to produce biofuel quicker by being able to add more honey and biofuel in it at once. The Electric Smelter, which uses batteries instead of wood to smelt ores, and the Advanced Stationary Anchor, which can be controlled using the engine controls. Pretty neat loot. Once the radioactive gas is cleared, you are able to move down into 2 underground bunkers of sorts to get a bunch of nice loot. Once you visit the Temperance, you will also find Arctic large island spawning, which are a really cool addition and actually have great loot. So, for my rating of Temperance, location-wise this one gets a 5 out of 5. A very unique new look with a ton of beautiful looking areas. It's also perfectly designed for snowmobiles, which leads me right into the gameplay. Gameplay-wise, this gets a 5 out of 5 as well. The snowmobiles are awesome, and I wish you could take them with you everywhere, which is sadly completely impossible unless you use a mod for it. Which yes, this game has modding. I will also be covering that. The puzzles are generally fun, and the Celine reactor put up a fun and cool challenge. Loot-wise, I'll give this one a 4 out of 5. Just kidding, it receives a 5 out of 5, making it the perfect story island. The loot here consists of a ton of titanium, metal tools and food. So, let's move on to the very final story island, the final location of Raft, Utopia. Once you arrive, you find what looks like something that used to be a thriving town. Huge plots of land, lots of housing and generators amidst a ton of skyscrapers. You also see a ton of invention around, which is because you are standing on Detto's raft. Your first puzzle is to solve a code and enter his house. While looking around, you might find this building. It's heavily locked off and you hear people inside. There's also a key in front of it and a note, which is written by Hannah, wife of Ruben. Olaf locked all the residents of Utopia inside of this building. You might also see some hyenas, which were mentioned to be seen in Caravan Town. After solving the code to enter Detto's house, you will find a harpoon weapon, which after finding all the necessary parts for it by stacking a bunch of crates, climbing around, connecting cables, solving water puzzles, you are able to fire the harpoon cannon and ride along the harpoon using your zipline. You will find the second key here to the skyscraper. After climbing through some of the buildings here, you will come face to face with Olaf. Olaf believes that his investment in Utopia gives him the right to rule over it, and that everyone should bow down to him. We then solve puzzles, do a ton of parkour over and over again, fight against hyenas, and then face off against the ultimate mutant hyena, known as Alpha. This is a small boss fight that is incredibly dangerous. Be sure to bring a ton of food, healing salve and armor here. Once you do manage to defeat it, you corner Olaf, who then falls out of a window. He gets caught by a light strand though. You steal his key to the building where everyone is locked away in. In it we find a ton of aforementioned story characters. I'm gonna let this cutscene play here.
When the ocean itself broke civilization, the survivors were left with nothing. Yet, they persisted. The forward scouts rose up from the wreckage, defied our flooded world, and brought back hope. Now Utopia stands free once again thanks to their actions. With this final chance, we can begin the slow and difficult road to recovery. From today on, we are all forward scouts, ready to discover the next step for humanity.
You can now move around a market filled with people here in Utopia. You can buy things from vending machines, take a bunch of food that respawns here every so often and speak with the people here. You can meet Bruno, who still longs for Astrid and wants to return to Balboa to get his other children. Sparrow left on a journey to find Kaku. Olaf is now locked away. We can also find Detto and Hannah here. Ruben is also here somewhere canonically, but we for some reason never get to interact with him. Also, I may mention the blueprints we find here. The big backpack, which extends your inventory by another row, the electric zipline tool and titanium tools. Titanium tools are a godsend, but since the game is over now, they're useless. Now that we are done summarizing the story and gameplay, let me give Utopia a quick rating before I get into my thoughts. Utopia's location gets a 3.5 out of 5. It's amazing to finally see it, and it's a cool idea to have it be so expanded upon since we first saw it, with a ton of new architecture built around the skyscrapers. Though some of the areas, like the giant parkour, make absolutely no sense. They don't make sense as to why they are here. Neither do they make sense gameplay-wise, since this isn't really fitting to any of Raft's gameplay. And they are also just generally not fun. The market you unlock here and the simple fact that it's Utopia are its saving grace here. The gameplay gets a 3.5 out of 5. There were some incredibly fun elements, but also a lot of tedious ones. Stacking crates back and forth generally wasn't fun. I really enjoyed some later puzzles and fighting against Olaf and Alpha was fun, but everything else was rather meh. For loot, this one receives a 5 out of 5, but also kinda a 0 out of 5. 5 out of 5 because of the titanium tools and general pretty great loot we find here, but also kinda 0 because it's not worth anything. For the rating I'm gonna go with 5 out of fairness though and give this item a 12 out of 15. So now, my thoughts. Raft has a ton of flaws. Even if on the surface level it might not seem so, the game seems in no way finished. The story might be completed, but the gameplay isn't at all. If you have played Raft, did you ever continue past Utopia? Maybe because of achievements. And a few of you probably wanted to finish your Raft. But other than that, why continue? I know a game has to end somewhere, and no game is fully infinite. It will get dull eventually. It's just that Raft gets dull really quickly once no story islands are left. As I've said, and you can find proof of this in any Let's Play you watch, after Chapter 2 it's really just a rush to the end. Nobody stops for small islands anymore. That's simply because they are boring. There are a total of 10 small tropical islands, which are the ones that spawn usually. After a couple hours of gameplay, you know which ones are which, at which point there is no excitement in seeing them anymore. What this game lacks is variation, and it lacks it desperately. This is why I mentioned that the update that added whales, turtles and dolphins was great. They gave you something to look forward to seeing. Seeing a whale swim past could add excitement to any situation you may have been in that moment. Also, the final update just seems incredibly rushed. I am convinced that the characters we find on the story islands were supposed to be able to actually go and join you on your raft. The way they talk makes it so obvious that you are at one point supposed to be able to fully interact with them, being able to say yes or no to them when they were asking if they could come and join you. I think the developers just figured at one point that this would be too much effort to implement, so they simply made them playable characters. Now, to their credit, depending on which character you play as, the first page of the journal will be different, which is a nice addition. But imagine how great it would have been to have characters join you on your raft. All of them introducing themselves with specific roles speaks even further into this. Tala would have gone around preparing the ship, as foundations are able to be left in a damaged state by sharks. This could have been a perfect job for an NPC. Same with Johnny, who offers to do heavy lifting. I'm unsure what this would have added, but perhaps it would have something to do with the domesticated animals. Elaine would have helped with trading in some way, either giving you coins every so often or giving you discounts on items at the trader. Shogo would have helped with crops as he's a bioengineer. Them simply disappearing also speaks to this. They would have teleported onto your raft and joined you on your adventure. In the Chapter 3 trailer, we see all different playable characters standing at the front of the ship once they arrive at Utopia. This is probably just showing off the new playable characters, as this trailer released 5 days before the update released. But there is a small chance that this is a leftover piece of media of all of them being NPCs that join you on your adventure. I think this would have been a way better system than the one we got. I'm fine with more player models, but were they really worth squishing in new NPCs on all islands, even if they made no sense canonically? Like Johnny on Balboa, for example. Why the hell is he there? Also, to speak more on the trader, I don't get the whole system really. You rather quickly unlock all 3 tiers. After like 4 trader visits you will be at tier 3. After this there is no reason to buy the tier 1 or tier 2 bait. Now obviously not every system needs to last throughout the entire game span. Wooden spears for example only lasted for so long as well. But I think it's weird to include this many new special fish only to give them so little uses. Actually not even little uses. One use, selling them. You can't even put them in trophy boards, which you can do with all other fish. Why not at least make them a decoration? The new fishing bait could have had so many more uses. Also, by the way, Chapter 3 in and of itself would have been a great update if it wasn't the last one. It built the foundation for a ton of new updates. Now, this has never been 100% confirmed anywhere, but from all that's going around, Raft will never receive another major update. After Chapter 3's release, they said that only bug fixes and a console port were planned from that point. By the way, the console port should hopefully be arriving soon. Sadly and disappointingly, Red Beat Interactive is absolutely quiet on the status of Raft. No updates as to how things are going ever, just the occasional merch promotion and Raft Steam key giveaway. The last update on Raft was over half a year ago, where they announced that the game will be coming to console soon. The biggest issue truly is the lack of communication, and them basically confirming that no updates will be coming. The world of Raft is incredibly lackluster. After you beat the story, there's no reason to really continue. So here are my suggestions. As I believe I have the ideas that, if they were implemented, would make Raft become a staple in survival games. Not that it isn't already immensely popular, but right now it's more of a story game than a survival game. For suggestion number 1, a way to tackle the lack of variation. This is one of the biggest issues in Raft, and thus one of the most important suggestions. And I think the final part of this suggestion really tackles the problem the best. This suggestion is not much about adding new locations, as it is about adding variation and randomness for infinite content. I'd suggest giving each island a chance to spawn something rare on them. There are 2 rare islands thus far, one featuring a crashed plane and one featuring a crashed boat. These 2 are great and are exciting to find, and I think they should stay that way. But perhaps similarly, small structures could spawn on small islands, maybe small remnants of houses that were built by other rafters before our time. I'd also suggest a new weather system. Right now it's either clear day or it's raining. There used to be foggy weather, but it was removed. I'd say there should be huge storms, perhaps even tornadoes in the distance. The current rainy weather is underwhelming. What if we could see storms approaching in the distance that would have massive waves under them? Lightning strikes that could hit your raft and damage the player. Adding new random factors makes for a multitude of new situations that are desperately missing in Raft. Also, how about new enemies? Enemy rafters perhaps? We already have an integrated NPC system and a system for dynamite throwing, thanks to the Olaf fight. What if some islands were guarded by enemy NPCs that threw dynamite at anyone trying to get on the island? Perhaps we go even more complex. What if other rafts pulled up on your raft and threw dynamite on it? I could see this being harder to code though. Here's my number 1 most important suggestion though, for more variation, that I think makes for the most amount of content in the easiest way. Giving small tropical islands a chance to spawn right next to each other. Perhaps even placing 3 or 4 of them right next to one another in rare events. Maybe even add a chance to spawn different types of enemies on them, maybe poison puffers or warthogs. Maybe the new dynamite rafter I suggested. Make 2 chests of loot spawn on them and I'm sure people are already excited to go explore them. Maybe even have 2 large islands spawn next to each other. I think multiple islands spawning next to one another, either fully connected or with a tiny bit of distance between them, would be the single biggest way to add a ton of new possible variation. And it would be rather easy to implement, and this system could easily be expanded further by simply adding more island variation. Which brings me to my second suggestion. For suggestion number 2, it's simply just more islands and structures. Right now there are a total of 10 normal tropical islands and 4 large islands. These are way too few. There used to be 5 large islands, which I mentioned pretty early in the video. Here's footage of one of these. This was quietly removed though, a smaller version of the radio tower. This island was great. I can't possibly think of a reason why this was removed. They should definitely add this one back. I'd also suggest tripling the amount of types of small islands there are. There are a ton of older islands that used to be harder to climb. They could just re-add those ones and make a couple entirely new ones. Also, adding small islands for each biome would be great. Snowy small islands, evergreen small islands and desert small islands. These should only spawn after you have reached their respective story locations though. I'd say adding 10 more of each of the 4 biomes would suffice. Adding more large islands would be great as well. Right now there are like 2 desert large islands, which are officially classed as small islands, though I consider every island that you can find using the receiver a large island. There are also only 2 snowy and 2 evergreen large islands, and 4 tropical large islands. I'd say make that 8 for each biome. That, alongside some randomly generated things on them, would make for a ton of new variation. This could actually lead the player to want to explore them more. I'd also suggest fully new structures. What if after Utopia we are able to find small swimming towns of rafters? Perhaps even add a trading outpost on them. You could talk with the characters there and take some loot from them. Also, how about adding stony peaks that stick out of the ocean that spawn randomly? These would only ever spawn outside of the path the player is taking, so that the player is never able to get the raft stuck in front of them in case a player decided to build an absolutely massive raft. Otherwise, if players do decide to venture through them, extra loot will be swimming in between them, including a lot of barrels swimming around and occasional extra crates on rocks. I'd also say the radio tower themed large island should be re-added, as well as getting some more variations of those ones. Maybe Varuna Point themed islands. Small building tops with a bit of an underwater segment. My third suggestion is quests. Why not make the NPCs of Utopia give you quests? They could give you tokens as a reward. These tokens could be spent on the vending machines of Utopia. Right now, the tokens can only be found laying around and are few and far in between. A quest could be entirely randomized and could be very simple things. The NPCs barely even need voice lines. They could just say, hey, could you do this for me? And then they send you on your way to do whatever. Find 5 treasures, catch 5 tuna, find the rare planktrash island, bring me 20 pieces of sand or whatever. The rewards could also be decoration items. Just like the renovation update added about 60 new decorative items, perhaps add another 20 or so and make them a reward for completing a Utopia NPC's quest. Maybe make each NPC have a total of 5 quests, the last of which grants you a random new decorative piece, after which they only give you random quests for coins. I would die for this to be a thing in Raft. This could also simply be expanded in updates. You could add multiple hours of playtime to the game by simply adding 5 quests that end in 1 piece of decoration. If you bulk release 10 at a time, each time the player would have potential 20 hours of content. Quests could also be given by the trader outpost, which could maybe be the main system to gain reputation with them to unlock new tiers, as simply selling them fish makes little sense in my opinion. Also, I'd maybe suggest giving some quest storylines a bit of a highlight sometimes. Maybe adding a new mini-story location. Perhaps make stories like that of Bruno conclude this way, by going and finding Astrid and having her come back with you to Utopia. As I've said, story islands are the definite highlight of this game, and adding even mini versions of them that you could randomly receive through quests would be awesome. These don't have to be huge ones like Temperance, Varuna Point or Caravan Town, just small little unique locations. My 4th suggestion is deep sea diving. Perhaps like one of the Utopia NPCs give you deep sea diving equipment as a reward for a quest. You would then be able to find new colored dots on your receiver, perhaps red ones. These indicate that deep under the water there is loot. You could then use the new equipment to swim down really deep to go and find loot. I actually thought this could theoretically be a DLC for Raft, but the developers have stated that they don't want to do DLC at all. My 5th suggestion is probably the biggest and most unrealistic one, but one that I had a dream about and ever since I wanted to see done in Raft. Mega islands. Islands that are 5 times as big as the current large islands, larger than Balboa and Temperance combined. In my dream they had a jungle theme and you could go explore temples on them. This is purely just wishful thinking though, I could not see them actually doing this. But imagine how cool it would be to see an absolutely massive island in the distance. But yeah, this is rather unrealistic, but would be great. Number 6 is the singular biggest suggestion. Literally, only adding this one keeps the game alive forever, on its own. No input from the developers. You see, we have the receiver system set up already. If the developers were to add a base that allows for people to create custom islands, or even storylines, meaning finding new codes on custom islands, and then were to set up a Steam workshop, the game would forever have content. This system is probably pretty easy to implement considering the payoff being infinite content. The workshop would offer infinite storylines. There could literally just be extra pages in the journal, like these little notes here. They could just add a base that adds more codes to it. People could then craft their own storylines and islands and place loot on them. As a level designer myself, I would love to create a short Raft storyline of my own. And I am 100% sure I'm not the only one. I can't overstate how good this would be for the game. If the workshop was also to add a base for custom items, that would be incredible, but I could see that being harder to balance out. More storylines are literally just more content. The type of content that most people play this game for. Unique locations. This one suggestion is 10 times as important and 10 times as good as all the other suggestions I've made. So these were my 6 main suggestions. I truly believe that if the developers were to add all 6 of these, or even only a couple of them, the game would be in the top 10 Steam charts consistently. Also, by the way, for the people wishing for like a MMO type of update, this would not be possible, because in Raft, the world actually moves around the player instead of the player moving around the world. So multiple rafts are impossible. Though to be fair, there is a MMO mod. To quickly speak on modding, modding is not officially supported, but there is a community out there. Right now it mostly consists of cheat mods though, and few add some new content. But I'd suggest you to go look for some if you want to continue past Utopia and want some new content. I also want to give a special shout out to the Raft Custom Island mod. It's still in development, but it will hopefully add what many of us were wishing for that I also mentioned, custom islands. But yeah, getting back to my suggestion, I'd personally even be ready to pay for these features, but if the developers don't want to add DLC, I fully get it. I also fully get them moving on, and I simply have to respect that decision. I do believe they miss out on a ton of potential in Raft. Raft right now feels very much unfinished, and not at all like a survival game once you get past the first few story locations. It's sad that there is absolutely no reason to move on after Utopia. I can only hope for more content, but I fear it will never arrive. I must say that while I respect the decision of Redbit Interactive, them not communicating at all with the tons of Raft fans that are waiting for some sort of update is a pretty shitty thing to do. At least give us a tweet or something. A simple, right now we're working on a console port, would suffice, as they do manage to log into Twitter every so often to let us know that their plushies are on sale. But oh well, these were my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed. This was a very different video from what I usually do, but I hope you guys liked it. Consider subscribing and thank you for watching.